ain't nothing easy about easy. That I just did another video that wasn't recording, so I'm gonna try to complete this series. So I wanted to offer a little bit of a thought that was on my mind, is that I was appreciating that if you think about your nervous system, like as I recall from anatomy and physiology courses I took, anatomy is like the structure of the body, and then a physiology is the structure and the mechanics of the body and the functions of the body. You usually take those together in some kind of like medical or scientific training that would teach one or the other. You usually do both anatomy and physiology, and in there you learn that the body is composed of systems, and so those systems have like a function that serves a greater function, that's the composite. So it's like the units that combine to form the composite. But what I recall of it is that with the nervous system is that you have afferent and efferent nerves, and that refers to nerves that go from within, like the will of a person, to outside, and affect an environment as a person appreciates that environment as being without. And then they also, there's the sensations that come within that receive ranges from the out. You could almost say that our five senses are, so from that standpoint, if our sensation goes both out and in, afferent and efferent, and our senses, sight, hearing, touch, taste, smell, are part of our nervous system, essentially because they inform our nervous system. They give us what is our nervous system takes in the perception of our senses, our five senses, but it can stand to reason that our senses may have an effort, outgoing component also. And according to the YouTuber Morris Brooklyn, our senses do in fact have dual or multiple functions past what we can normally appreciate in normal consciousness. And some of our imbibing of entheogens, that's a plant, animal, and maybe mineral substances that at least that inform that impact our state of experiencing ourselves. That some would say state of consciousness, but I'll just say our state, our sense of self, our sense of experiencing ourselves. That is reality. Reality is not different than what we appreciate as ourselves, because you can actually not affect reality or be affected by reality except going within yourself. You go within yourself to go without, and you come from without to go back within yourself, but it has still been within yourself. And I think that that's a lot of what's a detriment about like medicine and science in modern life, is that it's an imposition from without, but we have been conceived from within, and we have been formed from within, and we still actually exist within. So anything that's an imposition from outside, an invasion from outside, is a form of violence, and it is detrimental to my taste. So I don't see a reason to fix anything that still works. But according to and that's what they're trying to do. Like these people that want to fix your brain or fix this and that, a lot of times they want to fix something that already works because they're more concerned with the fixing than with the working. But according to Morris Brooklyn, our senses have at least a dual, if not multiple, purpose. Our senses, and I've said that I extrapolate that our nose might have to do with fighting, because one is that the nose is deeply tied to memory, but to my taste, trauma is also deeply connected to memory. What deeper memory do you have of an environment or a person than some trauma that you sustained in that environment, in that person? And does that environment or that person remind you of anything that the trauma you sustained with them? A form of trauma could be fighting. So smell is deeply tied to memory. What has the longest smell? What has the greatest memory in nature that we know of? The memory of an elephant. What also has the biggest nose? The nose of an elephant. So there may be a connection between nose, memory, trauma, nose, memory, fighting, trauma, nose, memory. So you're in a fight, and the rules of engagement are one thing. What you're willing to do and not do are one thing. What you think yourself as is one thing going into a fight. But then you take a blow to the nose. That's going to change. That's going to put you in your place, or it's going to have you put someone in their place when your nose had become involved. Then I think that like the mouth might have to do with connect with sense of self and assimilating self. So a lot of the food that we take from without us, we enjoy. What's the purpose of it? It's important to enjoy your food. A lot of people would say that. What's the purpose of enjoying your food? You enjoy your food as a communing with the food, to imbibe the food and assimilate the food as you, but it had been delicious to you, agreeable to you, Therefore, it is agreeable enough to assimilate into your body. And that food which is not agreeable to your taste, you likely eject it and don't assimilate it to your body because it's not agreeable first by taste and then by the body. So the mouth is like that, but it's also like that with lovemaking, because our lovers, the people in our life, our relationships, if they're that close to us, we also imbibe them and become one another. And that's a lot of what I think lovemaking might be doing, is actually imbibing one another. And a lot of lovemaking has to do with the mouth, if we're being honest. But then also, like, so people say, like, what is the sixth sense? Is the sixth sense not also the sex sense? Because your sense of your sensation, your erotic sensations of your genitals is yet another sensation that's a little bit different than your senses. It's not outside of the range of like your sense of touch, but it's a different aspect of your sense of touch, almost near about a different sense and a different state of consciousness had been your reproductive organs. But that's an example of how they actually have at least two functions, because they have an afferent and an efferent function. That is, they or an afferent and an afferent, or an efferent and an efferent. But your sexual organs can also go into your digestive system, in that, to be frank, you defecate with your sexual organs, and then you also imbibe with your sexual organs, similar to your mouth, where your mouth also, it can defecate like throwing up, but it can also imbibe. But the sexual organs are similar like that, where it has a dual purpose like that, very necessary, but also very distinct and different. But our senses might be like that too. And then I also thought that sometimes our senses take in different things. So whenever you become aware of something, you're only consciously aware of a small range of your real awareness. So when something doesn't feel right, you may have already picked it up differently than your conscious awareness with your actual senses. And your reason is actually part of your sense. So maybe what is the sixth sense? The sixth sense might actually be reason, your mind. So what is sex without your mind? If the sixth sense is the sex sense, but the sixth sense is also reason, what experience of there is sex outside of your mind? Because the mind had been the first step and the last step in sex, I think. But what I meant to say is that so we're actually only aware of a small amount of what we're aware of. But I think that sometimes I had a family member, when I was visiting a family member who had a very serious brain injury that was from bacteria that they ingested as a very young person. We were both young men at that point, and he got very sick at that point, and he was in the hospital, and they didn't think he was going to make it. My dad says, like, my dad had not seen something like that, and my dad was very concerned, having seen a lot of life at that point. But my family member survived it, but he's been actually in a wheelchair since that point. That's 20 years ago now. Almost exactly 20 years to the month, he became in a wheelchair. And he's actually a productive person and a cool person, and he's actually as real. He's as much of himself before that, and he's as cool like that. Like he's like, sometimes I put together outfits and I say like different slick stuff, but my cousin in a wheelchair is cooler than cool, and like he exactly with his situation, and he would be as interesting and compelling and maybe enjoyable as company as I would be. My cousin in a wheelchair is like that, but at that time when we were visiting him at the hospital, my aunt asked me a question. Someone yawned, and she said, "Hey, why do people?" She at that time she could appreciate even then that I had like pet theories. She's like, "Why do people yawn like that?" And I didn't tell her what my thought is, but I did have a thought. Back then, I thought that when you get fatigued and a new thought comes to your mind that you're assimilating for the first time, you yawn like that. Yawn is similar to like throwing up. It might be a different version of throwing up. It's a similar emotion where it's a form of imbibing when you yawn, and so you're actually imbibing an experience and maybe assimilating a new thought. But I also think that yawning might be similar to death, where sometimes you see a person like me. I haven't been using firearms, but if a person actually moves in their life where they're going to firearms ranges or they're brandishing and bearing firearms like in their vehicle, I think that our body can feel that motion of what that is. So next time, notice if you're not driving down the road at night and you yawn for some strange reason, see if you didn't just go past some police officers, or imagine if there might be someone in your vicinity that's moving different, that is bearing arms, weapons, that is bearing death. So we have a gag reflex around dead bodies, and we can throw up. Also socially, we can throw up socially. We can also yawn socially. But is this yawning not also the sensation of being close to the experience of death? Late at night in dangerous situations, does that not make us yawn like that? It's just a thought that I have.